and has also been on the principal's list several times. He has a 4.57 GPA. He calls himself outgoing and he's a hard worker. He likes having fun and caring about others. He is currently the captain of the baseball team and was the captain of the football team. And Jack plans on going to Ohio State University. What are you going to study?
Engineering.
All right. Nice job, Jack. Thank you. And Maul. Maul is a WRC scholar athlete, and he's also been on the principal's list. He currently has a 4.6 GPA. He considers himself adventurous and compassionate, and he loves to eat and have fun with his friends. He is a part of National Honor Society, as well as a member of the soccer team. And he plans on going to Ohio State University, also for pre-med in biology. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This next young lady is our current salutatorian. She has a 4.63 GPA. Maggie, if you would stand, please. Maggie is an AP scholar and a scholar athlete. She calls herself spunky, motivated, and excitable. Her friends think she's goofy, though. She participates in color guard, track, and drama club, as well as many other things, and volunteers with National Honor Society. She plans on attending Northwestern University to study engineering. Congratulations, Maggie.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Unfortunately, our salutatorian was unable to make it, but just to give you, our valedictorian was unable to make it, but just to give you a little bit about him, his name is Elliot Yoon, and Elliot has a 4.81 GPA. I have no idea. He calls himself lazy. Right. Lazy, and others call him goofy, but he's an enthusiast for math. He was on academic, tennis, and hockey, and that's the reason he can't be here, because of a tennis match. He plans on attending Northwestern and to study math and become a cowboy. So just want to say congratulations to all of you for making our top 10. And more importantly, congratulations to your parents and family for supporting you.
What I would like to do is totally based on your comfort, but I would like to take the kids out first by themselves, let them kind of get themselves together so we can get a picture with them all together the best we can without getting two on top of each other. And then the parents, if you could just sort of filter out one out in groups, but only the one that needs to take the picture, if you would, please. And we can get some pictures that way. And then you guys can go outside and take additional shots. You're welcome to stay for the remainder of the board meeting, but I'm going to guess that most of you will not take us up on that offer. So let's have students go out here first, and we'll kind of get ourselves lined up, and then we'll bring the parents in. I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Hopkins. And thank you for doing the work that you've been doing. She's been leading or helping us lead this charge, and really putting a lot of time, effort, and training of administration and staff. So thank you very much for your work.
Thank you. Mr. President and Mr. Thompson and other members of the board, I'm excited to share with you what we've been doing with regards to this equity conversation. I want to just kind of share with you a little bit about my why. As you are very aware, last summer there was a lot of things that sort of would be considered an adjutant to where are we going, what are we doing in America when it comes to equity. And so between the summer of injustices and unrest, COVID inequities, and just various inequities even within our schools, I felt like it was time for me to stand up and do something. And so my response was first was what can I control? What can I impact? What can I do? So I started doing a lot of research, a lot of reading of books, and I started having conversations with Mr. Thompson, Mr. Murphy, just about where can we go and what can we do. And I also realized that I wanted to get into good trouble. I wanted to get into what's considered good trouble. If you remember Representative John Lewis, that was his hashtag. He said, "Do not get lost in a sea of despair and do not become bitter or hostile," which is easy to do when you see so many things going wrong. He said, but be hopeful, optimistic, and never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get into good trouble, necessary trouble. We will find a way to make a way out of no way. And so I decided with my roadie, Mr. Murphy, to get into some good trouble. And so basically phase one was really to talk about systemic racism. I worked with my staff and we worked with the district administrative team, and we started talking about understanding the components of systemic racism. We looked at defining what race is and what racism is. We've talked about systemic racism and what it is. We've talked about implicit bias and microaggressions. We've looked at whiteness and being white in America, and what is that? American cultural norms, and even things like white privilege. And then what is our role? Because we talked about those things. So now, what is my role? What is the role of the administrative team? What is the role of the staff at South? And so we talked about examining our personal beliefs, looking at what are we willing to be uncomfortable about, because we all know talking about race and racism is uncomfortable. We looked at talking directly about racism and being white in America. We've talked about that. We talked about accepting what role we play in systemic racism. What is my role and what role do I play? And then last but not least, determining if you're willing to do something about it. What are you willing to do? And so just to give you an example of some of our discussions, we've talked about the difference between equity and equality. And if you take a look at this picture, in this picture, you see that each one of the students have a crate and they're trying to see the baseball game. But if you notice, that little one on the end still cannot see the game. But they have something equal. They all have an equal advantage there. This next one is, okay, well maybe they all need something different. The first kid didn't really need anything because he was tall enough to see over the fence. The second student needed at least one crate to see over. And then the third student needed a little bit more. That is equity, because it's about giving those kids what they needed. And then this last one is what would be really cool is if we just remove the barriers altogether. Remove the fence and make it so that the kids can see right to the game and not have anything in their way. And this is just an example of some of the things we talked about and had discussions about as various teams. So the goal of our learning, the ultimate goal of our learning is to create a culture within the Willoughby-Eastlake schools that seeks equity, diversity, and inclusion of all members of our community through courageous conversations that impact our decisions as an organization. And with that being said, so what do we do next? Where do we go from here? And so we're looking at, we talked about phase 1. There might be a phase 2, 3, and 4. And here are some of the ideas that come to mind on how we deal with that. Looking at our data, looking at our classroom and school practices, coming up with some action plans for change. Looking at phase 3, having courageous conversations with our students. Looking at curriculum and district practices and having an action plan, because you can't do any of these things without being able to ready to take action. And then phase 4 would be courageous conversations with our parents, with our community, and then what action for change are we willing to do and take. And so James Baldwin wrote, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." And that's it.
Thank you, Mrs. Hawkins.
Robin, can you share that with me, please? That PowerPoint?
Yes.
Robin has worked extensively. She mentioned Mr. Murphy and Gina Brown as well.
Mm-hmm.
But Robin has been our leader in these conversations, and I can tell you that we have had some conversations that have made me uncomfortable. We have had conversations that have made me look at situations differently, and I know others differently. And they have also sparked conversations with Mr. Murphy and I one-on-one, talking about various issues and what we're doing and can't do. So the work is important, the work is critical, and it is very much needed in our very diverse district. So we look forward to seeing what you can do moving forward and how we can help support and all of us. Because this isn't Robin's mission, this is all of our mission moving forward. So, but you are needed.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for all of you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, item 2, community engagement. Superintendent, question.
We haven't been getting a lot of flow in from our board meetings per se, but they're coming in other ways. So I think it's important to share the other ways that they're coming in and get those out into the community. So there's 4 questions. also vaccinated, fully vaccinated, which is nice. Another question is, some school districts are allowing students to be outside at recess without a mask. Will we change our procedures? When it comes to changes, I will tell you we are cautious about making changes to our policy out of sheer safety. If we're going to make an error, as we've said all along, we're going to make the error on the side of safety. So, but yes, we did receive clarification today, a lot of communication today. Mrs. Beal has done a great job of handling that. Ron Graham is the director of the Lake County Health Department, or Lake County General Health District is the official name. And they've approved that students are permitted to play outside without a mask during recess. So all other times the students are still required to wear the masks, but if exposed, however, while not wearing a mask, students will still be required to quarantine per the health department and CDC. So that's the disadvantage of the mask. So certainly as a parent, you reserve the right to say, I want my child to wear their mask at recess. Let us know that if that's your opinion. But we will follow the guidance of the Lake General Health District until otherwise told something different. But the masks are still required as they're traveling out of the building, traveling in the building, etc. Just when they're at recess for these we have about 5 weeks left of school roughly. So we'll see some warm days, obviously. Guidance will come out to our building principals this evening and in the morning to start moving that policy moving forward. On April 5th, the governor stated that all restrictions regarding the number of people permitted to attend outdoor events, such as athletic events, would be lifted. Will Willoughby-Eastlake lift this as well? Again, this is another very confusing one, because while the governor did say that, it has not been approved by the legislature or the Ohio Revised Code, and the current orders continue to state that there are limits of 30% and fixed seating at outdoor events and 25% fixed seating at indoor events. So until there's a change, that's where we still are. As we're getting close to prom, who knows, you know, what prom is going to look like at this point. We're going to try to have a prom, but we have to have it under a controlled environment and obviously follow CDC guidelines. I can take no credit. Actually, Jack, who you met just a few minutes ago, started corresponding with me, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, and we started to have some meetings with students, and the students' preference was not to graduate across the stage like we did last year. In smaller pods was the plan. They wanted to do it outside, and so we started looking at different venues, and actually the group of students who two of the four were here tonight. What a surprise that they were two smart kids in the top 10, but made the suggestion of, what about Captain Stadium? And I thought, really, the first thing that jumped into my head was 3 negative thoughts. One, how's the baseball field going to work for a graduation? My mind couldn't conceptualize it. Second thing that popped into my head was, well, they've got spring baseball games. What are the odds that their nights are going to be open when we need it? That's got to be really low. And 3, it's going to be crazy expensive, because we've rented it for football games, and that was expensive, but we had the gate revenue to offset it. We don't have gate revenue to offset the cost, so this isn't going to work. But Mr. Murphy and I walked across the street, I think, right after that meeting, and were very surprised to find out that they had a plan already in place. It's not perfect, but we think it works pretty well. They're going to use the jumbo screen. We can have each student will have 4 tickets, and some will be able to go as high as 6, depending upon request and need, which is far more than we could fit in any other venue. And the students will be able to have pretty close to a traditional graduation. So it, you know, who knows, we may end up saying, well, this is how we want to graduate, and it was very inexpensive.
Great.
So all those things kind of came together. We were equally surprised, but that is, I attribute that out-of-the-box thinking, not to me, not to Mr. Murphy, but to a group of high school seniors. So they did a great job.
Great.
I'd also like just to take a second to address, there's been a lot of talk about our summer school, well, not summer school per se, let me back up and say the concern that is legitimate and real, and that we've talked about, that we know or we believe that we have created, or COVID has created, learning gaps for many of our students, whether they were online or in person. Everybody's education was disrupted for over a year now, and as a result of that, there's certainly going to be holes for many of our students. So we have ESSER 3 funds that are coming in that will help offset, those are federal funds, will help offset the cost of running our programs, and we're going to run these over a couple of years, and I believe we have 3 years total to spend the ESSER funds. 2025. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of what we were facing and what options people chose and what we're looking at doing right now. So we had in-person learning probably more than most schools across the country, as many schools across the country have still not returned to in-person learning. So obviously we gave parents the choice of in-person and online. 5,280 students participated in our in-person learning, and then we had 1,439 elementary students opt for virtual options, and 1,237 students in our secondary grades 6 through 12. So we had roughly, that's about 2,700 students online, and about 5,300 students in person. And then, of course, some of those in-person students, brick and mortar students, were sometimes virtual as well when buildings shut down for staffing issues or quarantines. So some of those shutdowns were November 23rd to January 16th. You remember, everyone went virtual. That was district-wide, and then again, periodic building shutdowns based on mostly people getting caught up in quarantines. That won't happen to us from a staffing perspective moving forward, because we have all been vaccinated, or we hope. And at this point, our understanding is that we won't. So what are we doing to address the gaps? So there'll be summer intervention that will go on this summer, and we are targeting really all of our students, but we are specifically targeting our most at-risk students. We are offering online tutoring and in-person instruction to try to close those gaps. Gina's department and Eileen's department have been working hand in hand to try to address the needs of our regular ed students and our special needs students. And so hopefully we won't find a situation where kids are falling through the cracks. We know that we're going to have to provide transportation and other needs for our students for that summer learning program. Then moving into 2021, 2022, RTI's response to intervention. Again, you're going to get a presentation a little later on that I cannot do justice with right now, and I'm not even going to attempt to. Again, Eileen and Gina have been working very hard at modifying that program, ramping up that program, making it more robust as we move forward. House Bill 436 is requiring dyslexia programming, which we think is also a positive thing. We're working on providing daily intervention and enrichment, and we're really focusing on what are called the extended learning standards, which originally was, is this fair to say, Eileen, originally was special education specific, but what we're finding is it's working really well whether you're special education or not. We're pushing that throughout the district, and these two ladies are leading that charge, and again, they'll be back to make a presentation more specifically, but I just wanted to give you some general information about what we are doing moving forward. So we'll have a conversation, I believe it is Wednesday. We have a work session scheduled on Wednesday night where we will address really two issues: our strategic planning and our virtual school options moving forward for students. And I think what's really important for folks in general to understand is perhaps one of the silver linings of COVID has been the realization that through our own public school, we can do online education and we can do it well. And so education is changing, and public education doesn't always adapt and change quickly enough. I think that's one of the greatest challenges to public education, is our inability to change and be flexible and adaptable. But one of those things we need to be is flexible and adaptable in terms of how we deliver instruction to our students. And it's going to look different for different students at different times and different places. And one of those is a virtual option or an online option. So we are diligently working through that process, and we'll have more information on that Wednesday night. That'll be a major focus. But it is our intent to have information out to parents in May, is our time, early May, and start the process of determining who our teachers will be, et cetera, et cetera. But again, we'll cover that in much more depth and detail tomorrow, or excuse me, Wednesday. Not sure if this is the exact place to put it, but we have a special night in regard to Mrs. Zurin. Amy has been serving our district and our community for 7.5 years as a board member. She was elected in 2014. Some of the highlights that have occurred under Amy's leadership has been the opening of our School of Innovation, new buildings at NCI Eastlake and NCI Willoughby, which have provided great programming for kids through all the way from our welding programs to our nursing programs and everything in between, with NCI Willoughby being our skilled trades predominantly, and NCI Eastlake providing those medical field trades predominantly. In addition to that, Amy was part of the bond issue passing on the board and then passing out in the community. That was in November 2015, and was there from the beginning to the end in the buildings and the construction of North High School, South High School, Longfellow Elementary, the renovations of all of our other buildings, our partnerships with the Y and the Senior Center. So those are really, when you take a step back at that, that's something that will be a hallmark in Willoughby-Eastlake history as a school district, and you're very much a part of that. She has served Willoughby-Eastlake schools as the delegate to the Ohio School Board Convention, and we are sincerely grateful for your dedication and commitment to the district, and first and foremost to the students of Willoughby-Eastlake. I think that was always at the forefront of Amy's mind as she made her decisions throughout her tenure here on the school board. So I would like to give you $1 million prize. but we couldn't quite afford that.
Oh, darn it.
Yeah, but
Okay.
but we do have a card and a gift for you, and inside here is also a gift card of something we hope that
Okay,
you will enjoy. But we sincerely appreciate your time here on the board. Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, you can come up and hug your mom.
This is my Longfellow elementary student who appreciates your new building. We'll miss it totally.
Look over this way. Thank you.
Well,
No hugs from my high schooler.
There you go.
There you go.
Delaney couldn't make it. She was too tired in her room.
great.
Nice job, Zachary.
Mm-hmm.
And just a couple of notes on where we are with COVID exposures for our students. We are at 385 total cases, but currently we only have 8 students impacted and 1 staff member. So the numbers at some points would be 40,
Right.
50, 60 at a time to active cases, sometimes even higher, to under single digit. So let's hope and pray we continue to stay that course. And we're at public comment right now.
Mr. Charnello, is there anyone who wanted
Do
to
not
speak
have any.
publicly? Okay, thank you very much. Item 3A is the approval of the minutes for March 8th, 2021. Do I hear a motion for that approval?
Mr. President,
Mr. Roskis?
I will make a motion to approve the minutes of March 8th, 2021.
Thank you. Do I hear a second? Mr. Jones?
I second that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Is there any discussion? Mr. Charnello?
Mr. Merhar,
Yes.
Mr. Roskis,
Yes.
Mrs. Zern,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Dr. Beal,
Yes.
passes 5-0.
Item 4 on the agenda is the treasurer's report. Mr. Charnello?
All right, attached is the March 31st, 2021 financial report. We did collect our tax settlement, so we have collected 92% of our revenue to date through 3/4 of the year. That is to be expected since we are primarily funded by local tax dollars. So we are where we should be revenue-wise in terms of money coming in. The expenses are a little trickier this year just because we're starting to see a lot of entities bill us later. You know, we've had some entities that billed us about $500,000 last year, bill us $0 to date. So it's a little frustrating because you're trying to forecast and predict where we are, but then a lot of these institutions are delaying our billings. So not all of them, but just some of them. That is where we are through that. So hopefully April, May, because some of these are other school districts. So, you know, it's been a very difficult time for other schools. And they've just had a little billing timing. So, you know, we'll probably catch up in the next couple months. 4B. This is the appropriations amendment. This is primarily for adult education. That is the federal funds. That is why we received them, we approved them at an earlier meeting, and now we're appropriating them for adult education. We also have an increase for some of our 002 bond retirement for debt payments that were in March, and then also some for health insurance. C is our Minutemen HR Management Services Agreement. You may know I look at everything, turn over every stone. Kathy might cringe every time she hears I'm going to make a change. But, you know, we deserve the best. We deserve to work for the best. I interviewed 4 really great workers' compensation, third-party administrators, and I was really impressed by one. Thought they gave us really good customer service, and they were led by a South graduate. That played no part of it, but Scott's here. Scott Marsh, do you want to say a couple words?
Sure, yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to all of you, and congratulations on those great kids you guys had here earlier.
Yeah.
Like, what an emotional meeting I got to come to. You know, congratulations on your retirement from the board.
Thank you.
And again, thank you guys very much. This is going to be a great opportunity. My company's excited. I'm very excited to get to service you and give back. So hopefully this is a long partnership and helping the district as much as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But this is an item that requires a board vote. So do I hear a motion to approve item 4C, Minuteman HR Management Services Agreement?
Mr. President,
Yes, Mrs. Zern.
I make the motion to approve item 4C, Minutemen HR Management Services Agreement.
Thank you, Mrs. Zern. Do I hear a second?
Mr. President,
Mr.
I'll
Maher?
second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Maher. Is there any discussion? Mr. Charnella?
Mr. Murhart,
Yes.
Mr. Roskis,
Yes.
Mrs. Zern,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Dr. Beal,
Yes.
passes 5-0. Congratulations.
Thank you, everybody.
4D is the Cummins Generator Extended Warranty Contract. We've already been through 2 years of the contract. They would like to extend an additional 3 years, and since it's a multi-year agreement that saves dollars, it requires board approval. And I was told that if we did it 1 year at a time, the cost would go up about 20 to 30% every year. So this just kind of rate locked it for that 3-year period. So that's for your approval.
And where are the Cummins generators in the district?
I think this is only for the one that is in this building.
Okay.
And that's, you know, whenever power and internet goes out, then we call Pat up and he makes sure the generator's working, and we keep working and crack the whip, and we don't get to go home.
So if the world ends, this is where you want to come to, at least until the last couple of minutes, anyway.
Again, this requires a board vote, so do I hear a motion to approve item 4D, Cummins Generator Extended Warranty Contract?
Mr. President,
Mr. Murhart?
make a motion to approve item 4D.
Thank you, Mr. Murhart. Do I hear a second?
Mr. President,
Mr. Jones?
I'd like to second that motion.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion?
Just to note, I think it's important, why would we have a generator at central office and not where students are? Because this is what keeps our communications and all of our systems up and running and allows us a fighting chance to at least try to communicate.
Right.
So that's why it's important for us to stay with power on. Plus, you know, we don't want to let any administrators leave early, right?
So, quite a lesson
Darn
learned with the fire
administrators.
also.
Yeah, we certainly did learn that lesson, did we not?
Mr. Chanel?
Mr. Murhart,
Yes.
Mr. Roskis,
Yes.
Mrs. Zern,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Dr. Beal,
Yes.
passes 5-0.
Mr. Chanel?
4E, purchase orders and blanket certificates. We have 2 invoices that exceed their purchase order by $3,000 or more. One is for the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. That is for unemployment claims. It was just a very large invoice that came through, and it exceeded the remaining amount that was left on the purchase order. As you'll see, a couple down, we ended up creating another one. Second one was for Walter Haverfield. Same thing, the invoice came in, it was larger than the purchase order, so we need to get that approval. The middle section, 3 of those are for Love Insurance Agency. Those are then and now certificates just due to timing between the invoices and when the purchase order was created. A Walter Haverfield purchase order, that invoice was back in December, and the purchase order was after that date. And then Easy Facility Inc., this is a shared spaces scheduling platform. And then the bottom ones are blanket certificates of $50,000 or more. So we have the Love Insurance Agency, which is $87,000, that was for insurance. Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, that's $50,000 for unemployment claims. STRS retirement system has $190,000. NEO, this is for healthcare reimbursement, that was $60,000, and Medical Mutual of Ohio. As for employee insurance, that is $3,340,000. If that's chump change, I want some of that. 4F, transfer of funds. This is from the general fund to the 035 termination of benefits. This is for the health retirement account, $200,000. 4G, gifts and donations. First donation was from Pioneer Waterland and Dry Fun Park. They donated 387 complimentary admission tickets. That was a value of $10,836 to Eastlake Middle School.
Great.
Number 2, Babcock Vocational Education Trust donated $3,766.46 to NCI Willoughby Auto Collision Program. And number 3, the Soy PTO donated $6,000 to the School of Innovation. So thank you to all of them.
Yeah, thanks.
Last item for your consideration, the student activity program purpose, goals, and proposed budgets and revisions for fiscal '21. We have a couple budget revisions, and then also, it looks like one budget and purpose and goals that's attached.
Thank you, Mr. Trinell. The next item on the agenda, item 5, is the superintendent resolutions.
Thank you, Mr. President. Item A for your consideration is an agreement to allow Walter Haverfield to serve as dual representation for both us and the Buckeye Relief LLC, which is the company that's located next to the Transportation Department in Eastlake. We don't believe there's a conflict of interest. They're a client, we're a client. We negotiated the deal on our own, so it wasn't brokered through our attorneys in terms of price point to sell land. So this is an agreement to allow them to represent both parties.
Okay. Thank you. Do I hear a motion to approve item 5A, conflict waiver with respect to Walter Haverfield LLP, representation of the district in relation to the sale of property to Buckeye Relief LLC?
Mr. President,
Mr. Murhart?
I'll make a motion to approve item, was that 5A?
Thank you, Mr. Murhart. Do I hear a second?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I'd like to
Jones.
second that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Do I hear a discussion? Mr. Trinell?
I'm sorry, thought I had turned it off.
Mr. Murhart?
Yes.
Mr. Roskis?
Yes.
Mrs. Zern?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Beal?
Yes.
Passes 5-0.
Mr. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. President. Item B for your consideration is a contract for furnishing school pictures. Interstate Studio was the only vendor that submitted a bid. However, it is, fortunately for us, it is the company that the majority of our administration, teachers, and parents, and I think probably secretaries, are happy with. We've had some challenges with school pictures, but Interstate does a very good job, and this is a resolution to continue with Interstate. Item C for your consideration are special service agreements, and these are with a variety of outside agencies to help us meet the needs of our students. And I think it's important to also understand that we also educate other district students in our school as well. So it's just a process that not every school district can meet the need of every single student, but collectively we can. Item D for your consideration is the adoption of a whole bunch of policies. Mr. Murphy, would you like to walk us through each policy in detail?
There's nothing I'd rather do.
Well, I know you would, but for the sake of time, we're not going to do that today. But these are adoptions at this point. Item E for your consideration is the personnel agenda. Again, the folks appear on this list prior to the board meeting, obviously, post the board meeting, and they do not become full employees until we have satisfactory receipt of records from the Bureau of Criminal Identification and Investigation, Ohio Department of Education, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation prior to them becoming fully hired as our employees. Item A for your Superintendent Policies. The first one is a first read of care of students with diabetes. There's been some legal changes, so that is a first read.
Thank you.
And I believe that is the last one, correct?
Mhm. Item 7A is the meeting notification of our next meeting of the Board of Education, which will be May 10th at 7 p.m. here on the first floor of the Willoughby-Eastlake Board of Education, 35353 Curtis Boulevard in Eastlake, Ohio. Item 8A is the adoption of the consent calendar. Do I hear a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
Mr. President,
Yes, Mrs. Zern.
I make the motion to approve item 8A, adoption of consent calendar.
Thank you, Mrs. Zern. Do I hear a second?
Mr. President, I will second that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Roskis. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Charnello?
Mr. Murhar?
Yes.
Mr. Roskis?
Yes.
Mrs. Zern?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Beal?
Yes.
Passes 5-0.
Item 9A is the press review. Are there any members of the press here? Okay.
Right. Aren't you a member of the press?
As part of the
School
press,
newspaper.
It's press.
as part of the press review, I would like to announce the timeline for appointing a new member of the Board of Education. Starting today and through April 23rd at 4 p.m., if you would like to apply to become a member of the Willoughby-Eastlake City Schools Board of Education, we will be accepting applications until April 23rd. That's Friday at 4 p.m. To receive application materials, please email Mr. Charnello, Willoughby-Eastlake City Schools, at nick.charnello@weschools.org. You'll be able to find that on our website. We will also post it on our Facebook and send out a press release to the community. Also, we'll try to send it out to the appropriate organizations. On April 27th and 28th, we will be interviewing the applicants. The date that we will actually name the board member will be determined, but prior to May 10th, prior to or on May 10th, the next meeting of the Board of Education, we will be swearing in a new member. And as part of that, I would also like to thank Amy for all of her dedication to our community and to our schools and to all of our students. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Go ahead,
Oh,
Danny.
okay.
Last one.
I make the motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Zerman. Do I hear a second?
I will second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Murhar. Do I hear a discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Charnello?
Mr. Murhar?
Yes.
Mr. Roskis?
Yes.
Mrs. Zern?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.